Hi, I am Alla Krygina, and I decided to do my project on coral reefs, and more specifically, on how coral reefs are impacted in various ways. There are many life forms that flourish in the ocean, such as fish, mammals, sea plants, corals, and so on. The ocean is 70% of the Earth, and there are many species not identified. What people do not know is that one of these life forms is very vital to our planet and to us as humans. These life forms are known as corals, and they have been around for billions of years. Coral reefs are diverse ecosystems that are held up by calcium carbonate, which is typically known as calcium salt. The corals themselves are marine invertebrates that are in the class of Anthozoa and the phylum Cnidaria. Coral reefs are very diverse because animals, such as fish, are also included in reefs. Most reefs are built off from corals and polyps, which are one of the two forms you would be able to find in the animal kingdom of phylum Cnidaria. There are many different types of polyps in the sea. Coral reefs typically exist in bright, shallow, and warm areas in the sea. Who wouldn't want to see and dive under to witness the beauty of corals? Well, that's just it. We do not pay attention to what is really happening to the corals, and we are definitely not conserving or preserving them as much as we should. Coral reefs are in great danger as of now. Coral bleaching is now more and more of a problem, with the human population increasing and the coral decreasing, and the fact that natural disaster is the less impact on coral reefs than human impacts. Coral bleaching is a process when corals lose their color. It is mainly because there is little zooxanthellae, which are little organisms living in symbiosis, which is an organism that lives within the body or cells of another organism in the corals. Corals can also lose their color to the cause of regional scale bleaching, which states that an elevated temperature can stress out the corals so that they lose their color and pigments. If this thermal stress is continued, many corals are likely to die of being bleached. This is mainly because these corals will not have the adaptations to survive. Coral bleaching has always been more of a natural disaster that can be done by typhoons, cyclones, and even hurricanes. Another natural threat that coral reefs face is the crown of thorns starfish, which is pictured down below. It digests tissues of many corals. They feed on their tissues by everting their stomach and making the tissues liquefied to absorb later on. I wanted to show a video with Steve Palumbi, a marine biologist from Stanford University. He will talk about the many impacts that humans have caused, as well as those I have mentioned.
Coral reef ecosystems all over the world are under threat from people. Runoff from land brings down sediment that can smother corals. It brings down trash that can pollute the ocean. These rivers also bring down nutrients from farmland, and those nutrients, if they're too concentrated, can cause the algae on the reef to bloom and smother the corals. Coastal development takes away parts of the coastline that are really important to coral reefs. Mangroves, for example, or seagrass beds. Both of these can catch the sediment that otherwise would come down the rivers and smother the reefs. Then overfishing can remove the very species of fish that can keep those algae out. The combination of all these things, the overfishing, runoff, nutrient loads can cause a reef that was once healthy to decay and die. And in addition to these local threats, there are global threats. Global climate change threatens to raise sea level perhaps 3 feet or more in the next couple of decades. It threatens to increase the temperature of seawater, causing corals to bleach and die. It threatens to acidify the very oceans, and that may cause the coral skeletons themselves to begin to dissolve. All these threats together mean that modern coral reefs are much less able to support human populations than they have been in the past. Just when we need coral reef ecosystems to be as healthy as possible, many of them are in serious danger.
The main threat to coral reefs are actually humans. Surprise! And they do not have the intent of harming coral reefs, but they do unintentionally. Overfishing with industrial fishing is one of the downsides, since fish are very important aspects of coral reefs. Without them, it wouldn't be a functioning reef. Also, aggregated mining is another issue with humans and coral reefs. Since us humans are very industrialized, we tend to forget that nature isn't as industrialized as us. And when their ecosystem is ruined, these corals start to die off and make matters worse. Both natural and human impact actions are bad, and we need to start thinking about conserving and preserving coral reefs. There are many things that humans do unintentionally because they do forget that they are not the only one species living in this world. For example, many people use sunscreen to ward off a sunburn or either get skin cancer. But what these people do not know is that sunscreen contains many carbon-based chemicals that hurt corals. Oxybenzone is the main chemical in sunscreen that affects coral reefs. It leads to the bleaching of corals and has very dangerous effects towards young corals that causes endocrine disruption as well as DNA damage. This means that we need to create a sunscreen that is more biodegradable, so it will be safe for corals and also safe for people to use while swimming in the ocean. Another further study states that most human land projects block sunlight from corals that rely on sunlight to grow. This is another problem done unintentionally by humans. We need to be more aware about the actions we take and ask ourselves if we are not hurting anyone or anything in the process. If we begin to think like this, most of our problems will be solved environmentally. I wanted to put my focus on a little island in Samoa known as Upolu, which has one of the worst coral reefs that really need to be regenerated. This is a video from National Geographic on this case. The village in Nampolu have been wondering why they weren't getting as much fish, and since they rely on this fish, that is a problem. The villagers have started to conserve these beautiful reefs, and there has been progress ever since. Coral reefs are very important, and we need to help them thrive. In order to prevent these type of things, we need to start conserving and preserving these magnificent sea plants, since they are very vital to our planet. We need to start paying attention to our planet and climate change, because if we forget about the fact that there are other species on this earth other than humans, our world will die off. Our world is a beautiful place, and since the ocean covers 70% of our earth, it is important that we nourish it. Thank you very much.